Welcome back, and in this video we're going to conclude our discussion of Sumerian civilizations. Just to recap a little bit from the last video, we explained how we're moving from the Neolithic Revolution and very early settlements to early civilizations. These civilizations are based on the ability to sustain agriculture, to sustain a food supply, based on the ability to write, and the writing of the Sumerians is called cuneiform. And increasingly, we start to see changes in government. So we start to see that these societies that previously had been totally theocratic, where you have the priests who are offering sacrifices to the gods, so that the gods will bless the food supply, so that the society will continue to survive. You start to see them sharing responsibility for leading these societies with kings and soldiers. And so these kings and soldiers are now seen, as I explained, as kind of a necessary part of coordinating all these different people living together. All the land around the rivers is now pretty much under cultivation, so there's going to be competition. And so the kings and the warriors, who form an important part of this society, are also providing defenses for people's lands. We move on to the next slide now. We're looking at kind of the everyday lifestyle of people. People lived in pretty simple houses. In the city, these are houses made out of mud-dried bricks with narrow streets and thick walls to keep out the sun. And so this meant that they were cool, but kind of stuffy, not big windows or anything like that. People slept on the flat roofs, still have flat roofs, as we discussed with Hayek last time. Most people have some sort of pottery or wooden furniture items, any kind of metal items like knives and jewelry. Those are pretty expensive. They have most people have a fireplace for cooking. Of course, there are dangers of fire, internal fires that go along with that. They ate diets of grains, lettuce, fish, and beer. And still, again, pretty primitive sanitation. People are drinking from the river. Sewage is also going into the river. Most people have a single piece of clothing, and it's kind of a rectangular woolen garment. And so this gives you a sense of what the lifestyle of ancient Sumeria was like. We move on to the next slide. We can see that around 2200 BC, there are new groups that start to move into Mesopotamia. One of the first of these groups was the Akkadians. And so around 2200, the ruler of the Akkadians, named Sargon the Great, defeats the Sumerians. He defeats the cities of Ur and Uruk and the other Sumerian cities, and he establishes the first empire in Western civilization. And he expands his territory, expands his empire to connect the Mediterranean with the Persian Gulf, and this facilitates a trading network across the Akkadian Empire. However, after Sargon's death, this empire is going to disintegrate. But now we have Sumerians and Akkadians who are mixed together in this society, but this brief moment of empire has kind of disappeared, and we're back to sort of local city-states again. Around the year 2000, so about 2 centuries later, a new group called the Amorites, or Westerners, invade Mesopotamia from the north and from the west. And they establish themselves in the region of Assyria, and they have a capital city of Babylon. And they establish themselves as the rulers of the Middle East. These are the ancient Babylonians. They defeat the last kings of the Sumerians. Sumerian civilization is overrun and conquered. But what's interesting is that its language will continue to be used for centuries to come, but it will be used as an official government language, or it will be used as a religious language used in liturgical ceremonies. So the Amorites have kind of taken over, they're ruling over this culture, but they're still maintaining aspects of Sumerian culture. For example, they continue to worship Sumerian gods along with their own god, Marduk. Now, these ancient Babylonians were famous for their studies of mathematics and astronomy. They're some of the great early astronomers. They're also some of the great creators of legal codes. And so one of their kings named Hammurabi is famous for creating one of the earliest standardized law codes that has been handed down to us. And so the punishments in Hammurabi's code are seen as quite harsh. There's a lot of mutilation, there's a lot of execution. It's important to remember that part of the reason for this is that there's no incarceration structure in this society. So punishment has to be immediate. There's no way to lock someone up for 10 years, 25 years. And so for that reason, the punishments were seen as significantly harsher, or they are harsher perhaps than modern day punishments. Again, despite the fact that Hammurabi had established this code to provide a standardized law that would be enforced equally throughout the empire, by the time of his death or immediately after his death, the ancient Babylonian empire is going to collapse, and Mesopotamia is once again going to return to a state of disunity. At this point, another group of invaders, this time known as the Indo-Europeans, again, these are nomads who come from Central Asia and migrate south into the Middle East and conquer the lands there and establish themselves as rulers. This is a practice that is going to be very regular throughout the early history of the Middle East. And so the Indo-Europeans are the next group. And so they are going to bring in groups like the Hittites and the Mitannis, who are going to set up their own kingdoms. And there's no sustained empire, but it's important to remember that these are the different groups that are coming into the Middle East by the time we get to the periods sort of between 1700 and the year 2000.